Calling to order the Committee on Labor and Tourism for a hearing on 3 bills. Today is Tuesday, February 15th, 9:30 a.m. We're in conference room 312 and also via video conference. Vice Chair, can you go over the rules for the hearing?
Yes, in order to allow as many people to testify, there will be a 3-minute time limit for testimony. Please keep yourself muted and your video off until it is your turn to testify. If you are having technical difficulties, please use the chat function to contact our technical staff. However, if you are disconnected, please rejoin and we will resume your testimony if time permits. Please refrain from profanity or any uncivil language, as this behavior would be grounds for removal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. First up is HB 2440 relating to public works, imposes penalty on both the person and firm upon finding of repeat violations of state law governing wages and hours of employees on public works. First up to testify is Department of Labor Chair Ann Pereira Estacio.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the Committee on Labor and Tourism. Name is Ann Eustachio. I'm Director of Department of Labor. The department stands on its written testimony with comments, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That's all the testifiers we have that indicated they'd be on the Zoom. We also have testimony from the Hawaii Regional Council of Carpenters, Nathaniel Kinney in support, Hawaii State AFL-CIO, Dion Dizan in support, Operating Engineers Local 3 Hawaii in support, Hawaii Government Employees Association in support, Hawaii Nurses Association Local 50 in support. Members, we only have one testifier. Are there any questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to the next bill. The next bill is House Bill 2408 relating to minimum wage. Beginning July 1st, 2027 and each year thereafter, requires DLIR to annually adjust the minimum wage hourly rate and tip credit amount for the following January 1st, based on a 3-year average of the Consumer Price Index of all urban consumers. First up to testify, Department of Labor, Director.
Good morning again, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the Committee of Labor and Tourism. I just want to point out that we noticed that we had sent up testimony for 2408, but we noticed that our 2510 is posted for both bills. I just want to make sure that you have that testimony. It may have been a clerical error. So the department stands on its written testimony in support of indexing the minimum wage rate, but we have comments and oppose the increases, including the indexing in the tip credit. I'm available for any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Next up to testify, Victor Lim, Hawaii Restaurant Association.
Hi, good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the Committee on Labor and Tourism. Good morning, and my name is Victor Lim, and I represent the Hawaii Restaurant Association, which represents 3,400 restaurants here in Hawaii. We really support the intent of this bill. As you know, whether you do indexing or not indexing, I think it's almost like 6 one way, half a dozen the other. Probably 49, 51% on either side will be where the thing is. As you know, our industry is one of the hardest hit by COVID. 2 years into this, our restaurants are still struggling to keep their doors open amid a surge in coronavirus cases, record inflation, labor shortage, and supply chain delays. We business community look at the minimum wage basically as a starting wage that is paid to someone entering the workforce for the very first time with little or no job skill. This is not a wage that should provide a living wage, as many in the media has stated. We have never been against providing fair wages for our employees, but just caution that increases be reasonable, that many small businesses as well as consumers can absorb. Thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to testify on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, Ted Kafalas.
Aloha, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. My name is Ted Kafalas. I'm the Director of Strategic Campaigns for the Grassroots Institute. As Mr. Lim noted, many businesses are still struggling to make it as a result of the lockdowns and restrictions. And we believe a substantial minimum wage hike would be a recipe for disaster and nearly guarantee their closure. A lot of times the minimum wage debate is often framed as a fight between businesses and employees, but really raising the minimum wage can hurt both. As companies find ways to cope with the increased costs of doing business, a lot of them will raise their prices to offset their costs, further raising the cost of living here in Hawaii. And while there's an argument that some low-wage workers would make more money, the gains are nullified by a loss of employment or hours for other workers. For example, a 2018 study by the University of Washington found that increasing Seattle's minimum wage just $2 an hour resulted in both the loss of about 5,000 jobs and an average cut in pay for the remaining employees of about $125 a month due to a cut in their job hours. Thank you all so much for taking this information into consideration as you make your decision.
Thank you. Next up, National Federation of Independent Businesses, Melissa Pavlicek.
Aloha, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. The National Federation of Independent Business represents the smallest of businesses, and often or typically our members have 10 or fewer employees. But we know that small business creates the vast majority of jobs in Hawaii, and we are least able to absorb minimum wage increases. And we respectfully oppose this bill and stand on our written testimony. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, Chamber of Commerce Hawaii, Trevor Abazu.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Trevor Abrazua with the Chamber of Commerce Hawaii. We stand on our written testimony in respectful opposition of the bill, and we're happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Trevor. Next up, William Perron, individual.
Aloha, Chair, members of the committee. Will Carone testifying as an individual. I offered comments on this bill. I'm really excited to see the committee look at indexing the minimum wage. I think that's a great idea. It's something that we've been pushing for a long time. And I want to note that if you index the minimum wage, it'll actually make things easier for restaurants because it will make it so that the jumps up to an increased minimum wage are smaller, so easier to handle. So I think that's the benefit of indexing, and it prevents working families from falling further and further behind, prevents us from having to come back and have this discussion over and over and over again. The reason I couldn't support the bill, however, is because I'm fundamentally opposed to the tip credit. I think it's fundamentally unfair. It's an unfair practice that allows some businesses to offload some of their labor costs onto their customers while other businesses are not allowed to do that. I also note that there's a lot of research that indicates that workers that work for tips and are subjected to the tip credit are also exposed at much higher rates to sexual harassment and other kinds of violence in the workplace. So I think that the tip credit should actually be abolished entirely. And that's the reason why I can't support this bill. If it was just indexing the minimum wage, I would 100% be in support of this bill. A couple other things to note while I still have a minute or two. The Seattle, Washington study that was just mentioned earlier has been roundly debunked. You can look up all kinds of media talking about how it's been walked back since its publication. It's a very problematic study with a lot of flaws in its methodology. As far as price increases, we've done analysis, independent analysis with Raise Up Hawaii that shows that for price increases in the 1% to 3% range, we can raise the minimum wage up to 78%. That's the 18 by 2026 number. So, the price increase argument really isn't, it doesn't hold any water either. The low wage workers that would see a minimum wage increase, they would come out ahead by a long way, even with some small price increases. So that's my comments for this bill. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next up, Hawaii Food Industry Association, Lauren Zerbo.
Thank you, Chair. While Hawaii Food Industry Association supports a reasonable increase in the minimum wage, we do oppose this measure. We understand that our grocery stores operate on about a 1% profit margin. So the ability to plan out labor costs in advance is very important for them, and tying the minimum wage to CPI would really make it difficult for our businesses to plan in advance and budget. So for those reasons, we would have to respectfully oppose this particular measure. Thank you so much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next up, Tina, Hawaii Merchants of Hawaii, Retail Merchants of Hawaii, Tina Yamaki.
Aloha and good morning. I'm Tina Yamaki with the Retail Merchants of Hawaii, and we are opposed to this bill, but we do appreciate the lengthened effective date on this. And like Lauren has mentioned, it's really hard for businesses right now to calculate what their increases are going to be if it's based on CPI. And we saw this past year alone, CPI went up 7.5%. So it's not just small increases, it's huge increases we're seeing. And that one was the largest in the last 40 years. So it's really hard for us to gauge what our budget's going to be. The other thing is we are so tied into outside operating factors, like when shipping costs go up, manufacturing costs go up, prices go up on our goods. And so we have to pass that along to our customers. However, the retailer is not making more money on these things. We make anywhere between 1 to 3 cents per dollar. So while prices are going up, our profits are not. So it's going to be even harder to afford if it is based on CPI. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, that's all the testifiers that said that they would be here on the Zoom. We do have additional testimony from Hawaii Government Employees Association in support, AAUW of Hawaii in support, United Public Workers, ASHME Local 646, UPW in support, League of Women Voters Hawaii in support, Democratic Party of Hawaii Education Caucus with comments, Imua Alliance with comments, Hawaii Petroleum Marketers Association in opposition, Hawaii Food Manufacturers Association in opposition. Let's see, Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association with comments, Hawaii Nurses Association, OPEIU Local 50 in opposition, and Society for Human Resource Management Hawaii in opposition, and one other individual with comments. Members, are there? Sorry, I have a correction here. UPW was with comments. Okay, members, any questions for the testifiers? Okay, seeing that there are none, let's move on to the final bill. It is HB 2510. It's relating to income. Part 2 makes the state earned income tax credit refundable and permanent, provides for carry forward of non-refundable credits previously claimed. Part 3 increases and amends the refundable food excise tax credit. Part 4 increases the minimum wage rate to $11 per hour beginning January 1st, 2023, and increases it $1 a year to 2030. Increases the tip credit over the same period. Part 4 amends the household and dependent care tax credit to apply to expenses paid for the care of qualifying individual regardless of age, and specifying that a qualified individual is, among other things, a recipient or eligible to be a recipient of Social Security Disability Insurance. And Part 6 appropriates funds for an outreach campaign to educate low-wage earners about their withholding options and to provide support when completing their withholding forms. Okay, members, we have about 150 testifiers in total. But first up is Department of Labor and Industrial Relations Director.
Good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. The department stands on its written testimony, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Next up, Department of Taxation, Director Isaac Choi.
Yes, Chair. This is Jonathan White on behalf of the Director of Taxation. We provided testimony providing comments, and we'll stand on those written comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii, Trevor Abazua.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. We stand on our written testimony and appreciate your hearing this bill, which takes a broader approach in addressing the needs of Hawaii's working families. We want to highlight that the Chamber does support a $15 minimum wage increase by 2027. Now, $18 is a concern based on a survey that we did of our members, where about 450 businesses participated, with over 50% of those businesses having 25 employees or less. Now, some of the results were shocking, where 66% of businesses said they would need to cut staff if the minimum wage was increased to $18. 27% of businesses said they would need to lay off half of their workforce and half of their staff if it went up to $18. And 32% of those businesses said they would need to shut down completely if minimum wage was increased to $18. And additionally, I want to point out the Star Advertiser poll surveyed about 800 registered voters in the state, and where 70% of those voters supported a $15 wage increase or less, and only 25% of those voters supported $18 or higher. Now, the Chamber looks forward to continuing the discussion and working with members on a solution, and we appreciate you giving us the time to testify. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, Hawaii Clubhouse Advocacy Coalition, Kelly Kogo.
Aloha Chair Onishi and House Committee on Labor and Tourism. My name is Kelly Kogo. I oppose House Bill 2510. I believe that we shouldn't compromise the timeline any further than having $18 by 2026 and not by 2030. I'm born and raised in Hawaii and have experienced seeing families not having enough earnings to provide adequate provisions for their members. This has caused a great deal of unnecessary mental health issues, which affects the stability of family units and possibly being forced to relocate where it may be more affordable. We want to keep our ohana together and protect our island culture. The living wage of $18 by 2026 will definitely help to keep the aloha spirit alive. I believe that we shouldn't compromise the timeline any further than having $18 by 2026 and not by 2030. So on a personal note, everyone, that our lives are in your hands, and I hope that our aloha is in your hearts. And one time, and Representative Onishi, I'm actually your neighbor in your district of Waikiauka. But at one time, I met you because we know each other from JC's, and I met you in town and I asked, what is a representative? Well, with my advocacy work that I'm doing, I'm learning about how to be involved with legislators. I believe representatives and legislators are public servants, and you are here to help people. So thank you very much and mahalo for your time.
Thank you. Next up, Hawaii Clubhouse Advocacy Coalition, Flora Patton. Okay, she's not here. Next up, Hawaii Children's Action Network speaks. Nicole Wu.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Thank you for hearing this bill. I wanted to draw your attention to a different section of the bill about the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit. DOTAX mentions in their testimony, and we agree that this bill would remove the child care portion of the Child and Dependent Care Tax Credit. In other words, this bill would actually increase taxes on many middle-class families with children here in Hawaii. Currently, the tax credit is up to $2,400 for a single parent or $4,800 per couple. And it provides a tax credit of between 15 and 25% of their childcare costs. We have some of the most expensive childcare costs in the nation. So we really are flummoxed and don't understand why a bill that's supposed to be helping families actually would raise taxes on a whole bunch of them. So, that's the part of the bill that we're the most concerned about. And we hope you'll either change that part of the bill or just defer this bill, since there are a lot of other bills in session right now that do good things for families. And this bill just has too many flaws. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Hawaii Iron Workers Stabilization Fund, Jason Bradshaw.
Yes. Hi, good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Jason Bradshaw, representing the Iron Workers Stabilization Fund on behalf of Managing Director T. George Paris. We'll stand on our testimony in opposition, specifically the increase of the tip credit to $2.75 and the length of time it takes to reach $18 an hour. We recommend amending the bill to the language of SB 2018, which increases the minimum wage to $18 an hour in 2026 and does not increase the tip credit, which we strongly support. Mahalo for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next up, National Federation of Independent Business, Melissa Pavlicek.
Aloha, on behalf of NFIB, we stand on our written testimony in opposition.
Thank you. Next up, Co-working Claire Mason. Okay, she's not here. Next up is Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice, Gavin Thornton.
Aloha, and thank you for your work on this bill and for the opportunity to testify. My name is Gavin Thornton. I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice. Most of the 200,000 plus people who are depending on you to act today can't be here because they're working. They helped get breakfast on your table this morning. They helped you purchase the clothes on your back right now. If they're only working one full-time job, they're earning about half of what they need to pay rent and buy food. If they have kids, and a quarter of people that would be impacted by a minimum wage increase have kids, and they're even further away from making ends meet. 90% of the folks that would be impacted by an increase to minimum wage are high school graduates. Close to half of them have attended at least some college. 10% have graduated from college. Every single one of these people is a real live person. I don't understand how it is that we can value people and their work so little that at minimum, we can't pay people who are working 40 hours a week enough to meet their most basic needs. I don't understand how it is that we can value like Pokemon cards for thousands of dollars, and yet we can't pay people $19 an hour in order to afford food and shelter. A permanent and refundable EITC, a more generous food credit, those proposals from this bill will help people. We share the concerns expressed by HCAN regarding the child care tax credit and the changes. We don't quite understand the intent of those. The minimum wage increase proposed by this bill, it will help people, but not nearly quickly enough. People have been waiting for 4 years for a minimum wage increase. They've been waiting for decades for a minimum wage that's sufficient to live on. Over the past 4 years, inflation has eaten away at what minimum wage workers are earning. They're effectively earning $2,000 less today than they were in 2018. That's one of the many reasons that we're asking you to amend this bill to make an immediate increase to the minimum wage of $2 to $3, followed by smaller steps to get us to 18 by 2026. We need to start valuing people in their work, and we need to start now. Mahalo for this opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next up, Tax Foundation of Hawaii, Tom Yamachika.
Thank you, Chair and members. Tom Yamachika from the Tax Foundation of Hawaii. We are not testifying on the minimum wage part of the bill. We wanted to concentrate on the different tax credits. Under current law, there are a multiplicity of tax credits that are there to help people on the lower end of the income spectrum. The result, we think, is unnecessary complexity and people losing out on credits that they otherwise would earn or would be eligible for. We think that a better way to approach this issue is tax rate relief. The brackets have not been adjusted for so long. I think it's well known that somebody at the very poverty line, the federal poverty line for Hawaii, would be in the fourth tax bracket, not the lowest, not the second lowest, but the fourth tax bracket from the bottom already. That's, I think, a clear indicator that the brackets are out of date. We'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next up, Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, Ted Kafalis.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Ted Kafalis with the Grassroots Institute. Again, we feel that this proposed minimum wage bill would hurt Hawaii's businesses as well as low-income working families. I'd like to highlight that this proposed bill represents a 78% increase in the minimum wage over the course of 7 years. For many local businesses, nearly doubling the personnel costs would be too costly to continue doing business in the state. I'd also like to direct your attention to a 2021 analysis of minimum wage research from the National Bureau of Economic Research that actually concluded the evidence pointed strongly to negative employment effects as a result of increasing the minimum wage. They also noted the impact of wage increases was especially hard on teens, young adults, and the less educated. Rather than focusing on the minimum wage in an effort to make the state more affordable, we feel that you all should instead focus on policies to lower the cost of living, like tax relief, as Mr. Yamachika noted. Thank you all for the opportunity to testify this morning.
Thank you. Next up, Community Alliance Partners, Kristen Ellis. Okay, she's not here. Next up, Hawaii Restaurant Association, Victor Lim.
Hi, good morning, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the Committee on Labor and Tourism. Thank you very much again for allowing us to testify on this HB 2510. We want to support and commend the House Legislative Body for trying to help the lower wage workers in our community with this comprehensive bill. This is probably the first time I've seen a bill like this that really cover a lot of different tools that we could use in the tool chest to help the lower wage workers. As you know, the Hawaii Restaurant Association is not against providing fair wages for employees, as well as tip credit for the restaurant industry, as well as other service industry. But making sure that people on the lower end get taken care of, we are for it. However, we just want to make sure that in our business community, the minimum wage is basically a starting wage. It's a wage that people come in with zero job skills, no job experience, and over a short period of time, they make $2, $3, $4, $5 more an hour. That will help them do based upon their input as well as output. So we really feel that this is merely a starting wage. I'm dealing with this part 4 of the bill, but we appreciate the House for really looking at it in a comprehensive way. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Will Caron, individual.
Aloha Chair, members of the committee, Will Caron testifying as an individual. I want to thank the committee for hearing this bill, and I want to thank the legislature for doing its best to put forward some kind of a plan to help low-income working families, and for its promise to do so this year. That being said, I respectfully have to oppose this bill because I think it has a lot of problems in it. I think starting with the tax credits, there are some issues, as mentioned by HCAN, with the Child Independent Tax Care Credit. The food excise tax credit, although it does need to be updated, the way that you guys have written it in this bill would create a benefits cliff, where families would go from having $150 to going directly to $0 when their income rises just $1 over the limit. And then with the minimum wage issue too, you know, I think Gavin from Appleseed made some really good points about how the timeline going up to $18 by 2030, by the time we get to 2030, $18 is just going to be insufficient. Once again, it's not going to be enough to allow people to live here in Hawaii. So if the legislature is serious about fulfilling its promise to create a Hawaii where working families can thrive once again, that timeline is simply too long. It takes too long to get there. I think that because a lot of the ideas in this bill, the worthy ideas in this bill, are contained in other pieces of legislation. For example, the EITC, the best part of this bill is the EITC expansion, but that's also contained in HB 2406. And as Jason Bradshaw mentioned, a better minimum wage proposal is the one that the Senate has handed the House in SB 2018 that cleanly raises the minimum wage up to $18 by 2026, which puts working families at least within striking distance of being able to live here and be self-sufficient. Even that wouldn't be enough, but it would put us pretty close. It would put us a lot closer. And you know, that 78% wage increase that we're talking about here, that's thousands of dollars more. That's $16,000 more in the pockets of a minimum wage earner than what they're getting now. That's life-changing. If we get there by 2026, that is literally life-changing for people. So if you are really serious about helping folks here in Hawaii, then I ask that you oppose this bill and instead support SB 2018 to get us to $18 by 2026. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, individual Carolyn Eaton.
Good morning. Aloha, Chair Onishi, Vice Chair Sayama, and members of the committee. My name is Carolyn Eaton, and I respectfully oppose HB 2510. Although it contains some worthy tax credit proposals, these are also present in other bills. You have an alternative, a Senate bill which will raise the minimum wage more rapidly. The incremental increases I hope you will enact after study of SB 2018 will allow a wage earner in our state the opportunity to earn $18 an hour by 2026, which approaches more closely Hawaii's current cost of living. Hardworking families and individuals deserve this action after so many years without a meaningful raise. Mahalo for hearing my testimony.
Thank you. Next up, individual Dale Head. Okay, he's not here. Next up, individual Ingrid Peterson. Okay, she's not here. Okay, next up is Retail Merchants of Hawaii, Tina Yamaki.
Aloha and good morning again. I'm Tina Yamaki with Retail Merchants of Hawaii, and we are in support of this bill, especially over the Senate bill. We would like to see that the increase would be more gradual and not increase over $15 an hour. Many of our members are small, locally owned businesses and are not able to afford the $18 an hour. And I believe Chamber of Commerce, which we partnered with, put out a recent survey, and it basically said 30% of the 400 and almost close to 450 respondents indicated that they would not be able to stay open for business if it raised to $18 an hour. So what does this mean? When you increase minimum wage and small businesses can't afford it, what we do is we either pass costs onto our customers, making it even more expensive to live in Hawaii. We do more AI, in which a lot of people have already seen. When you go to self-checkout lines now, you're seeing more of that. And we're also laying off our employees, or we also cut employees' hours, or worse yet, we just closed down. And like I mentioned, I believe last week, I have a couple of members who are, the demand from their employees is to go above the minimum wage to $15 to $18 an hour. They are actually going to lay off 20% of their employees in order to make this. And another one is actually consider closing down because they just can't afford it anymore. Businesses, we don't make a lot of money, especially during the pandemic. Like restaurants, we were one of the hardest hit. We had to also do with increase in shipping, cost of labor, and also cost of the manufacturer who's coming in. And it's things that we can't always absorb. We are trying everything that we can to keep our doors open and our employees employed. We do not like to lay off our employees or cut their hours. We want to see everybody surviving and employed. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, Hawaii Food Industry Association, Lauren Zerbo.
Thank you so much, Chair. The Hawaii Food Industry Association submitted comments on this measure, and we do really appreciate the effort that was put into drafting a bill that was fair and thoughtful. We have submitted an alternative schedule, which would actually end at 15 an hour on 1/1/27. And we do believe that that would be a more reasonable schedule to enact at this time, given the uncertainty around COVID-19, and a lot of businesses are still really struggling. This bill does represent, an almost 80% increase, which would be unprecedented. And we did also want to sort of highlight the fact that Hawaii is already consistently ranked one of the worst states to do business in the United States, and that the COVID-19 pandemic and economic downturn has really forced a lot of small businesses to close. And small businesses and local businesses are the ones that are most likely to be impacted by a dramatic increase in the minimum wage, whereas multinational companies would likely be able to survive because they can offset costs elsewhere. So, we'll stand on our testimony, but thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Members, that's the last of our online testifiers. We have maybe about 100 or so people and organizations that are in, I'm sorry. Oh yes, I'm sorry, I have one more. Maui, I think, Kamala, you're with the Maui Chamber of Commerce?
Yes, Chair Onishi, thank you so much for the opportunity. Yes, thank you. I did also want to mention, we did submit testimony and we'll stand on that in opposition of 2408. But I really wanted to talk today about this House Bill 2510. And we do think this is a better vehicle. A minimum wage is not a living wage. And, a living wage has many different drivers that increase Hawaii's inaffordability and make it a very difficult place to live. But many of those drivers are within government's purview, such as affordable housing and rentals, the cost of gas and utilities, and more, our taxing structure as well. And so, we really want to, continue to remind people that a minimum wage is a starting wage. And there are many things that are impacted by a minimum wage. And it can, as has already been mentioned, really hurt those unskilled workers or part-time workers, such as seniors, who need the jobs the most. And those are the first to get cut when we keep seeing continued minimum wage increases. Hawaii continues to be, as has also already been mentioned, one of the toughest places and worst places in the nation to do business, given our regulatory environment. Many say that businesses have recovered from COVID, which is untrue. They are still recovering. And we are seeing increased supply chain issues, inflation rising at an exorbitant rate. And we certainly hear and understand the wants of the people who are up against all of these significant challenges. And the quickest way they see those who haven't maybe run a business or understand all the impacts from running a business, they feel like, well, if the wages just go up, that it will help out more. But there's long been studies that show that when you increase the minimum wage too high, it actually has negative effects. Dr. LaCroix gave us a session on this a few years back. And this morning, Dr. Eugene Tien was on our Chamber Business Matters radio show, and he indicated that, of course, a minimum wage, especially going up to $18 an hour, is going to have significant impacts because it is going to add to the inflation. Those costs get passed down to consumers. And he specifically mentioned that the restaurant and retail industries would be hit hardest. And again, our public will be hit hardest because they're going to see their rates go up. Is there room to have a minimum wage increase? Yes. Most people are saying, you know, there is room up to $15 an hour. There is some data that says beyond 15, it really starts to have some negative impacts. We do need to understand the inflationary rate. And the best part is that Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism and Dr. Tien have some great and new updated statistics that it's really important to look at all sides. So we need to look at better solutions. We need to work on things that bring down our high cost of living. And we do support this bill as a better vehicle, but we still feel $18 an hour is highly problematic, and appreciate you working not only with the economic experts, but the business community, as well as the social services community on better solutions that work and are more holistic. And we appreciate this opportunity to share those thoughts on HB 2510.
Thank you, Kamala.
Thank you.
Okay, members, so that's the last online testifier. As I said, we have about maybe 100 or so organizations and individuals testifying in opposition, in support, and with comments. Members, are there any questions for the online testifiers? Yes, Representative Bellotti.
Chair, I have a couple of questions from the representative from DOTAX as well as DHS, but I don't know if they're available.
DHS is not here, but DOTAX should be still here, I hope.
Yes, Chair, Department of Tax, I'm here.
Thank you, Chair. DOTAX, in your testimony, I noticed this chart, so I just want to really understand what this is as an impact to the state. As I look at this chart, it's a testimony says that in each of these departments, is these the number of employees, state employees who are at, would be below the $18 hour wage?
Is this HB 2510?
Yes.
Is that the Department of Tax testimony or the Department of Labor testimony? I don't think we provided that information.
I believe it's the Department of Tax or maybe Budget and Finance.
Oh, okay.
Representative Bellotti?
Yes.
That's the BNF testimony.
Oh, I'm sorry. Tax, you're off the hook. Is VNF here?
No, they are not, as far as I know.
Okay. Chair, I don't know. Well, okay. There is one further question I do have for tax, if that's okay. And then if we can find someone from Budget and Finance to be available on this call, it would be very helpful. But for tax, you know, this I believe the intent of the dependent care was actually to not do as it's intended, but it was also to capture disabled individuals who are older than 13. So is there language that the Department of Taxation could provide if that is the intent?
Yeah, I think so. I think that, you know, there's 3 categories in there as written. And I think, you know, category B and C sort of cover that now. If you did want to add the Social Security language in there, but leave the sort of the general child eligibility in there, you could put the Social Security language in just in B or C. That's one option, because those are the sections right now that that have the disability language in it as the credit currently is written.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
No, that was it. Thanks.
Chair, I have one more question from Department of Taxation.
Yep, go ahead.
This is related to the food credit. As it currently stands, because we heard testimony from one of the advocates that there is a cliff created, but even under the current system, there is actually a cliff for anyone who makes over $30,000 individually or over $50,000 jointly. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Anytime you have a situation where at a certain point, the credit just goes away, there's going to be a cliff. So sometimes it'll go up like a upside, like a pyramid, up and then down.
And in fact, so as it currently stands, there's a cliff that we have to deal with. But then as proposed in this bill, the way we've drafted this, it actually puts more money in the pockets of everyone who makes under $30,000 and under $50,000 in the amount of $150 per exemption. Is that correct?
Yeah, the current one goes up to 110, and then that's only for the very lowest level. So this one is an increase for everybody at 30, just like you said. Yeah, everybody.
So it is actually more generous. So that's an inaccuracy in some of the commentary.
I haven't read all the testimony, but it is higher for sure.
Okay, thank you. Chair, I did have another question for DHS and Budget and Finance, but if no one's here for the testimony, I can pass on those questions.
Yeah, they aren't here to testify, so maybe we can send out an email to them with your questions. Okay, members, any other questions?
Chair, I have a question.
Yeah, Vice Chair Sayama.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for Chamber of Commerce Hawaii regarding their testimony. They had included in their testimony a poll that was conducted by the members, which included statistics citing 66% of businesses said they would need to reduce the staff if the minimum wage is increased to $18. Similarly, 27% of businesses said they would need to lay off half of their staff if it went up to $18. I was curious, I noticed there was no date as to when, what your members thought this $18 meant, 2030, 2026, immediately. Can you clarify that?
Yes, Representative, this was just generally. So if the minimum wage was $18 in general in the state of Hawaii, would they be able to survive that? So on the question, we didn't provide a date of the scaling. There was a separate question in the survey, which I'm happy to provide the members of the committee that detailed what rate that they would like to see it go up, and the consensus was that $15 by 2027. But for this particular question, it was just in general on the $18.
All right, thank you. That's all, Chair.
Oh, okay. Anybody else? Members, any other further questions? Okay, if not, I also have a question for the chamber. So I want to follow up on Vice Chair Sayama's question. So you provided us that testimony in regards to your survey members on that they would either reduce their staff, lay off staff, or their businesses would close. But there was no timeline in terms of when this $18 implementation would take place. So are you assuming that they assume that $18 would be next year? And therefore that's how they responded? Or is it in 2030?
I don't believe so, Chair. I think what we did was we based it on what the bills were being floated around at the time of the survey, which we conducted the survey in the middle of January. So they might have looked at the Senate bill that was there. But in terms of this particular question, it didn't have a date. So it was just in general, would they be able to survive a minimum wage increase at $18 in general? But it didn't have the date. That is correct.
So how much weight should we put on this survey, if that's the point? Because it's not gonna, regardless of what proposal is currently in the legislature, it's not $18 next year.
Correct. There were follow-up questions within the survey, which again, I'm happy to share with the rest of the members of the committee on what number they could survive or what number that they would like to see based on the year projection. And again, the $15 by the 2027 was what we saw. And I'm again happy to share the results, the full results of the survey.
So did you also have a follow-up question that asked those surveyed what their position would be if the minimum wage was raised to 15?
We did, yes. And I'm happy to pull it up if you give me a second here. But we did have a question on if they were to 15, what would it look like? Let me pull it up here.
Well, I guess I have a question. Why was that information not included in your testimony?
We just wanted to include the parts on where it would, based on the $18 and kind of go with our argument on what the chamber supported on the 15 by 2027. We do support a minimum wage increase, and based on our members' results, we do again support 15 by 2027. But the stats that we pulled for the testimony were just based on the $18 that were highlighted in the bill. Now, I do have the results here on the $15. So there was a question, if minimum wage increased to $15, would you be able to stay in business? And 12% said no, and 64% said yes. And then we did have an other category where they were allowed to explain their answers and put it in a category, kind of a paragraph form. And 23% responded in kind of a written paragraph form, explaining their side and explaining how their business would handle it. But again, 12% said no on the $15.
Okay. I have a question for Hawaii Food Industry Association, Lauren Zerbo.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
So, Lauren, your testimony is that you folks are against, I believe, an 87% increase in the minimum wage in 7 years. Is that correct?
I think it said nearly 80%.
Or nearly 80%.
Yeah.
Okay, but you are in favor of a 50% increase in the minimum wage in 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think that our position is really, we think 18 is high, and we think we could stomach 15 over a number of years. But I think we are hesitant to go beyond 15 right now, just because we don't really know fully the impacts of COVID-19 on local businesses and automation and what's going to be available for people. So we wanted to take a more cautious approach.
Okay, so I'm sure you're aware of the high mark that advocates are asking for in the minimum wage increase, correct?
I'm sorry,
Are you aware of the high mark that advocates are asking for increasing the minimum wage to?
Oh, to 21.
21, I've heard 25. So in regards to this bill and its time period and your proposal, I mean, how do you, I guess, reconcile what advocates are asking for and your advocacy for businesses, both large and small?
Yeah, it's a hard one. And like previous testifiers have stated, it's not that we, don't value our workers. We do value our workers. We provide them with health insurance. We provide them with valuable training. We promote them within our system. There are a lot of people that started out at minimum wage jobs as baggers who are now managers in grocery stores. So it's not really this dead end job where we're just paying people minimum wage forever. That's very much not the case. But we do think that there is a value in having a training wage. And if we increase that to $21 that's just not viable. I mean, it really, the value of the position does not match that. And so in that type of a circumstance, I think most people would choose automation. And frankly, I think most people will start going that direction to a certain degree, even with this proposal or a lesser proposal. It's just sort of the speed at which it would happen. And the other thing we worry about is really the local businesses have less money to invest in technology and less money to invest in automation, which would obviously lower their labor costs. So the impact of the actual labor increase may fall disproportionately on locally owned businesses with less resources. Is sort of our concern on that.
Okay, thank you. And I have a question for Retail Merchants of Hawaii, Tina Yamaki.
Yes.
Tina, you testified orally about talking to a person that said that they would lay off workers or they would have to close their business. Could you reiterate that testimony again?
Well, I can't diverge what company because I don't think the employees know about it yet, and I don't want
Oh yeah, no, I don't
divulge
want
that,
you to identify it. I just wanted your base statement.
So basically what I did, I go around and I talk to different businesses and I talk to our members, and you know, they're finding out that in certain areas, in order to get workers, they have to go way above the minimum wage because they are competing with other industries, like in the resort areas. They're competing against the hotels who are paying, I think, $20 an hour because they're, you know, union labor and all of that. So they got to raise their prices. I mean, their minimum wage prices, and some of them just can't afford it. So what they do is, you know, you do need cashiers and you do need some of these other people. So in order to pay a higher minimum wage, they might get rid of something like their entire human resource department or their security department or another type of department, or just 20% cuts across the board. And so those people are going to be laid off now in order to pay for an increase in minimum wage demands. And another company, which is a small locally owned company, they just don't know how they're going to do it. I think they're paying about $11 an hour to high school kids who are coming in, but they're telling me too, even adults, they have to train them. And it's not just how to use the cash register, customer service. It's take a bath, come to wear clean clothes when you come to work, you know, brush your hair, brush your teeth. It's daily life skills that they need to teach them too.
Okay, thank you. Members, are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we're going to recess for decision making. We're reconvening our hearing of the Committee on Labor and Tourism, 9:30 a.m. hearing for decision-making on 3 bills. On HB 2440, we'll be taking the recommendations provided in the testimonies of both the Hawaii Regional Council of Carpenters and the operating engineers in terms of including definitions for person and firm, and we'll be inserting a effective date of December 25th, 2040. Members, are there any questions? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Chair's recommendation is to pass HB 2440 with amendments. Chair, Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Bellotti.
Aye.
Representative Holt.
Aye.
Representative Kobayashi.
Aye.
Representative Quinlan.
Aye.
Representative Takayama.
Aye.
Representative Okimoto.
Aye.
Thank you, Chair. Your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. On HB 2408, we're going to be deferring that bill. On HB 2510, we'll be passing this measure out with the following amendments. We're going to be taking the concept of calculating future minimum wage increases found in HB 2408 and adding it to this measure. But we'll be taking the recommendation made by the Executive Director of UHERO to utilize the 3-year average growth rate of the statewide median hourly wage for all occupations, which is released annually by the U.S. Bureau of Labor, and it will start in 2031. We will also be we would also like to clarify that the definition of dependent is already being defined through Hawaii state conformity through the Internal Revenue Code, Section 152. Therefore, we'll be deleting the references to the Social Security Disability Insurance in Section 9. Also, in light of the testimony provided by DOTAX regarding their current outreach capabilities, we're going to be amending Section 11 by increasing the ceiling for the Tax Administration Special Fund to $4 million and changing the source of funding in Section 11 to utilize funds from the Tax Administration Special Fund instead of general funding. And we'll also be adding language to specify that one of the purposes in the Tax Administration Special Fund will be to provide outreach to low wage earners and provide support when completing their federal and state withholding forms. And finally, we'll be inserting a effective date of December 25th, 2040. Members, do you have any questions? Representative Okimoto?
Brief comment, Chair. Thank you. I really want to extend appreciation for, again, the majority's intent behind this. I know this is an initiative that's very important to the majority. I just want to say that although I agree with much of the bill, and I think I appreciate some of the amendments that have been proposed today, specifically with the tax credits and how we can help our local people. And I think this body should continue to consider these types of proposals. I cannot in good conscience at this time support this type of increase in minimum wage. I think the testimonies that were shared by our local business community it really it goes along with what I've been hearing from people in my community, that if we continue to do this, it will be detrimental to our local businesses through jobs or passed on to the consumers, things that we've heard today. So I am concerned about how this will have drastic or devastating impacts down the pipeline to our already struggling local businesses. We've heard again how our local businesses have been struggling through this COVID pandemic. So I think these are issues that I would like to see be addressed along the lines of how we can, affect or change the cost of living, address these things with inflation, our chain supply crisis, job security and development. These are all issues that I haven't felt comfortable I don't feel that we've addressed that necessarily to support our local businesses, and this bill will impact that. So for these reasons at this time, I will be voting no. So thank you, Chair, for letting me discuss that today.
Yes, thank you, Representative. Any other representatives? Yes, Rep.
Kobayashi had his hand up.
Oh, okay. Rep. Kobayashi.
Thank you for recognizing me, Chair. So I'm just some comments in support of this bill. There are a number of things that, you know, I wish we could have. I wish we could do this in a more rapid way than $1 a year till 2030. I wish we could do it without having to have certain takebacks like the child care credit, or continuing to increase the tip credit to continue the sub-minimum wage situation for those workers there. I wish we could tie things into cost of living as opposed to whatever wages employers decide to pay by having that change. I wish I could see a lot of these things. But in a non-election year, we were unable to pass $15. So I think if you can remember that. So now we have an opportunity in an election year to get $18 on an imperfect way. Thank God for small favors. Maybe there's a better way to do this for the people of Hawaii to be able to afford to live here. So far from what's been put before me as a choice and an option to support, this is probably as good as it gets. So given that situation, I'm supporting this bill in its current form because I have yet to see any alternative that is going to provide for better for the people of Hawaii at this point in time for this particular session. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Yes, Representative Quinlan.
Thank you, Chair. Brief comment. I just wanted to personally thank you specifically for all of your hard work on this issue. I know that the last few years, there have been a lot of advocates on both sides coming to see you, and I really want to thank you for all your hard work. I love every single part of this bill except for the $18. And as a former small business owner, unfortunately, I must vote no on this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions or comments?
Chair, brief comment.
Yes, Representative Sayam.
Thank you.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I do want to express my support for this measure and want to thank you and many others for their hard work. And to everyone, I guess, who has testified today, you know, it's clear that this is a really controversial issue, that there's no clear-cut solution. And to those who believe that the minimum wage is white and black, it really isn't. It's a complicated social economic policy, which requires a lot of thought, consideration, and a comprehensive approach, which this bill provides, contrary to SB 2018, which many testifiers have noted. And that's the reason why I support this measure, because it takes a reasonable and equitable approach to a complicated socioeconomic policy, which will directly help low-income, middle-income families who have been struggling during this pandemic, and will lift them up going forward, you know, all the way towards 2030. And so that's all I have to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, Representative Bellotti.
Just because everyone's chiming in, I just want to express my mahalo to the chair and the vice chair. And if I may have the words of the vice chair adopted as my own, I do really appreciate the work of this committee. I think we're tackling a very tough issue in a very responsible way. Thank you, Chair and Vice Chair.
Thank you. Members, any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair, for the vote.
Voting on HB 2510, Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments, noting the presence of all members. I have a no vote for Representative Okimoto and Representative Quinlan. Any other members with a no vote? Seeing none, any members voting with reservations? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you, members. This hearing's adjourned.